less light, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
so you can't see as well.
Okay. The special meeting of the city council will come to order. We're going to close session. And going to close session for the purpose of labor negotiations pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6 and Government Code Section 59457.6 again. First with the Assistant City Manager, Recreation and Community Services Director Penelope Leach, and then the Albany Firefighters Association. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak? Seeing no one, we will adjourn to closed session.
Jeff, population in Albany, 18,000? You have them, right?
The December 2nd meeting of the Albany City Council will please come to order. Will you join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Roll call.
Councilmember Atkinson? Councilmember Barnes?
Present.
Councilmember Moss?
Present.
Vice Mayor Weil?
Here.
Mayor Thompson?
Here. Next item.
Report on action taken in closed session.
The council met in closed session for the purpose of Government Code Section 54957.6 and gave direction to the mayor. The council also met in closed session for the same code number, and this we gave direction to the consultant. Next item, please.
Consent calendar. Consent calendar items are considered to be routine by the city council and will be enacted by one motion. By approval of the consent calendar, the staff recommendations will be adopted unless otherwise modified by city council. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a council member or a member of the audience requests removal of the items from the consent calendar.
Is there any item that council or staff would like to have removed from the consent calendar?
So, Mayor, if we could remove item 4.6, that's the item concerning the building and fire codes. We'd like to hold that over until the next meeting. There are some last-minute revisions that staff wants to suggest to you, and rather than have you consider them tonight, we'd like to put them into a staff report so you have time to digest them.
Thank you. Are there any other items? Is there any item a member of the audience would like to have removed from the consent calendar? Seeing no one, the chair will bring it back to council for a motion.
I move the consent calendar.
I'll second that.
It has been moved by Councilmember Atkinson, second by Councilmember Moss, that we approve the consent calendar with the exception of 4.6, which is being removed. Will you please poll the council?
Councilmember Atkinson. Aye. Councilmember Barnes.
Aye.
Councilmember Moss.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Wow.
Yes.
Mayor Thompson.
Aye, the motion carries. Next item, please.
Presentation, Community Emergency Response Team, CERT, swearing-in ceremony.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. My name is Karina Tyndall, and as part of my community outreach position, I teach the Community Emergency Response Team course for the City of Albany. CERT is all about giving residents the hands-on skills so that they can respond to a disaster quickly, efficiently, and thoroughly. And I see you're all looking at the pictures. These are pictures that Peggy McQuaid took during the recent class in September and October. And as we've seen recently with Typhoon Haiyan and the tornadoes in the Midwest, you never know when a disaster will strike, so being prepared is vitally important. CERT is a 24-hour course. It covers fire suppression, disaster medicine, light search and rescue, and much, much more. It's free, and the next one does begin on February 4th, and you can contact me or look on the city website under disaster preparedness to register. I just wanted to take a minute to thank both the police department and the fire department for helping to teach some of the modules. And I also wanted to thank Peggy McQuaid for being the co-CERT instructor and always available at a moment's notice to help out. So tonight I'm very proud to present to you our most recent graduates. There are 11 of them. It looks like not all of them were able to make it tonight, but we will still call their names because some of them may be watching at home. So graduates, I wanted to thank you for taking time out of your busy lives to come to the 3-hour classes in all the Tuesdays in September and October. I recognize it's a big commitment of time and effort, so thank you for making the time to do that. And I just want to reassure you that sometimes when you learn about preparedness, you start to worry because you have this greater sense of everything that you should be doing. So I just wanted to say you are more prepared now than ever before. So believe in that. And now I'd like to invite Mayor Peggy Thompson to come to the podium and present the certificates with their graduates. And also Fire Chief Lance Calkins has a small gift to present to you. So as I call your name, actually, can you come and stand up in front of the city manager, all of the CERT graduates? And you can just stand against that wall there. There we go. Cover up those other people. Great. The first one is Brian Beal. And Judith Carey. Belinda Foland. And these people are not present, but we also want to acknowledge their devotion of time and effort. Jeff Chin, Patty Chin, Phyllis Ciardo, Carolyn Garcia, Jackie Miller, Kate Riley, I thought Kate would be here, Leah Sagawa, and Delilah Wood. So thank you very much. There is one other thing. I believe 2 of you have agreed to be disaster service workers. So if you would just remain up here, then Chief Calkins will swear you in.
We have one, correct? Oh, good, very good. For all you that don't know, disaster workers are volunteers who are trained, pre-registered with the city to aid in response and recovery phases during a disaster. They're invaluable because they enable us to respond to the many emergencies that go on during an emergency or disaster, and enable us to respond to more calls and requests. Thank you for agreeing to be on call for our emergency and serving the city of Albany. And if you would please raise your right hand, and after I state your name. I do solemnly swear, repeat, that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter. I certify under penalty of perjury that the foregoing is true and correct. That's it. Good job. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next item, please.
Waste Management of Alameda County Recycling Promotional Video.
Good evening. We're here to present a brief instructional video about an innovative recycling program in Albany. The video is produced by the city and in partnership with Waste Management, and it outlines some important recycling programs in Albany. Residents can recycle batteries, cell phones, and compact fluorescents curbside. And the compact fluorescent, or CFL, collection program is really the first of its kind, and it's proved successful. So the goal of the video is really to promote that program and increase participation in it, and also convince people that recycling actually can be easy. And it's one of many programs that we do with Waste Management in collaboration with them. And we have some outreach flyers about the CFL recycling program, and also CFL collection bags are on the table back there if anyone's interested. And Rebecca Parnes is here as well to introduce the video. She is the recycling coordinator for Waste Management. She helped in the creation of the video and the script.
So thank you for taking the time to let us present the video. Waste Management had the opportunity to work with the city to create this video as a result of sponsoring the Albany Film Fest in 2013. So it was a double positive for us. And we had a great time working collaboratively with Jules Coblin and Jeremy Allen's team. Another exciting part of it is that we got to actually have a waste management driver who works on the streets in Albany participate in the process of making the film. So hopefully he'll see an uptick in the batteries, CFLs, and cell phones that we collect on the streets here in Albany.
Batteries, cell phones, and CFLs don't live forever. The City of Albany and Waste Management of Alameda County make recycling easy. Albany residents can recycle household batteries, cell phones, and compact fluorescent light bulbs, CFLs, curbside. To recycle CFLs, call Waste Management of Alameda County at 510-613-8710 to order a free Vapor Lock foil collection bag. Place dead batteries in a clear Ziploc bag. Do the same with cell phones. Place bags on top of your gray recycle cart the morning of your regular collection day. Help your driver by placing your carts 3 feet apart. Recycling these items saves precious resources. State law bans these items from the trash to protect public health and the environment. Your new trucks run on compressed natural gas created from methane at the Altamont landfill in Livermore, eliminating over 80% of the greenhouse gas emissions of diesel trucks. For more information, visit these websites.
Well, why don't you come on up while she's doing that?
Hi, Jack Kinney from the Community Media Access Committee and the Albany Film Fest. And I just wanted to commend everyone for the work they did on that video. I think it turned out really well.
Yeah.
And it's a really good example of the partnerships we've been able to have a hand in with the Film Fest. So our major sponsors like Waste Management and Albany Community Foundation are offered the chance to have a video made as part of that. So I want to commend everyone again for their effort, and I think it got a good result. And remind you, the Albany Film Fest is going to have its 4th one coming up March 1st. So I hope you'll all be there.
Thanks, Jack. Okay. All right, thank you very much. That is a very educational video. Next item, please.
Federal Health Care Act, presentation by Alex Briscoe, Alameda County Health Care Service Agency.
Madam Mayor and Council, I just wanted to briefly introduce Alex. He was appointed by the Alameda County Board of Supervisors in 2010 as the agency director for the Alameda County Health Care Services Agency, where he leads the design and development of health care services countywide. His full bio is attached to the agenda this evening, and as you can see, he has extensive experience in a number of healthcare areas, and we welcome him and appreciate his time this evening.
Hi.
Hi.
So my background is in adolescent mental health, and one of my first clinical supervisors said that human beings have the most complicated descriptions for the things we understand the least. So I'm going to take you through the 2,100 pages of the Affordable Care Act in 10 minutes or less. And my challenge is to distill it in such a way that you can represent it to your constituents and give you a sense of what we've done in Alameda County to prepare. We are, far and away in California, the single most aggressive and advanced jurisdiction in terms of the early adoption of the Act. Don't believe the hype. It's been the law of the land since March 2010. And your county has leveraged over $50 million of new federal money every year since March 2010 and have prepared unlike any other jurisdiction in the state. There are some states that are ahead of us, Oregon, Vermont, Massachusetts, but in terms of counties in the state, we're working very aggressively to take advantage of this opportunity. And I'm going to try to give you a balanced view. I'm extremely supportive of the Act. I think it's one of the most courageous things done in my lifetime, born after 1965 when Medicaid and Medicare were created. But it's also a deep compromise. It's an attempt to engineer a basic civil right on the backs of a $9 billion industry. So it has all of the compromises associated with a very difficult set of choices. But it does close one of the great moral and ethical failures of our society, which is not offering a medical safety net for people 19 to 64. So before I begin, I just need to take you back to 1965. So before I was born, when Title 19 was created, Medicare and Medicaid were created. Medicare for the elderly and Medicaid for the poor but only for a certain kind of poor folk. To be eligible for Medicaid, you have to be under 18 and poor, or if you're between 19 and 64, you have to be disabled or poor with a dependent child, making us the only industrialized nation in the history of the world that offered no medical safety net for the medically indigent adult, for that 19 to 64-year-old who was not disabled or with a dependent child. And what that led to was over 40 million people uninsured, with medical debt being the leading cause of bankruptcy. 60% of all bankruptcies in America are driven by medical debt. So one of the great challenges we face in the healthcare system is multi-generational poverty and its impact on health. And one of the things we have to accept is that the healthcare system is complicit in the stabilization of poverty in America. Poverty is now more stable than it has ever been in the history of America today. So a bunch of the data I'll show you doesn't include Albany because, as I just found out right before, you're slightly under the 20,000 person mark of the cities that we measure. So I'll give you a bunch of data, but it's not specific to Albany, but I can certainly get it for you. This chart shows you almost all of the cities in Alameda County with more than 20,000 people and the rate of the uninsured. You'll see that place matters. And as I'll show you in the next slide, we can tell you how long you're going to live by what zip code you live in. Yeah. Let's see if I can get this clicker going here. On. Got it. On will help. Got it. So there's about 200,000 uninsured people in Alameda County. The slide that you see now shows you who they are. The vast majority of those 19 to 64-year-olds I mentioned who are currently left out of Medicaid, but beginning in January 1st, they will be included in Medicaid. And the top shows the 21,000 children who are currently uninsured in Alameda County. And the reason I show that is we've expanded eligibility for kids before, right? S-CHIP, which you know is Healthy Families. It's been around since the late 80s. But the reason I show that slide is just because you're eligible for a benefit doesn't mean you get it. Of those 21,000 uninsured children, fully 14,000 are eligible but not enrolled. So could have a free health benefit. So I think one of the things I hope you leave with tonight is a sense that just because you're eligible doesn't mean you get it. You still have to go through the process of enrollment. And I would argue that all of us face a challenge of creating a culture of coverage, because with the bill comes an individual mandate that you have to have health insurance to be an American citizen. The same way you have to drive a car insured, right? But 22% of American drivers drive uninsured. So we have to create a culture of coverage that when you are in America and you don't have health insurance, you're taking a great risk. When you walk in the crosswalk uninsured, you risk your financial future and your family's financial future, because we know that EMTALA requires us to treat everyone who comes to a 911 receiving center. Your fire department is one of just a few that still transports. And when your fire department, with some of the best response times in the county, by the way, responds quickly and effectively and transports folks to 911 receiving centers, that receiving center has to treat them by law. It's called EMTALA. But that law says nothing about how much they can charge that person. And if they're uninsured, the medical bills mount and quickly become incredibly burdensome and lead to bankruptcy. So what does it mean? What does this act mean? As I said, it's the most sweeping legislation since 1965, passed in March 2010. And it will bring about 16 million Americans into the Medicaid program and cost about $910 billion. So for people who say it won't cost any money, they're lying. It's going to be very expensive. But you are already carry that burden in the rates you as an employer pay. The city of Albany, like every other employer in the nation, saw its healthcare premiums double in the last decade, and they're due to double again in the next. The cost that you pay in current healthcare coverage includes in it the hidden tax that we all pay for the uninsured. You see it in cost to charge ratios in hospitals, and you see it in the current premiums you now pay. So the great promise of the Affordable Care Act is to restrain or contain the escalating cost of healthcare. And in fact, between 2010 and today, healthcare costs have risen at the lowest rate in the history of healthcare. So we're already seeing some benefit. Please, it's not all good, okay? But to give you a balanced view, some important improvements have already been made. The bill creates an individual mandate, and most provisions of the bill begin in 2014, and full implementation you won't experience till 2018. And if you've been reading the news or watching the news, you'll know that there's been numerous hiccups. And I think probably 2018 is as early as we'll see full adoption, probably something like 2020. Remember, fully 25, I think 25 or 26 of the states chose not even to participate in the Medicaid expansion. Only half of the states of the nation are full participants in the Affordable Care Act. So I want you to, for a second, forget what I told you about the kids, right? Pretend I didn't say that. So pretend that you didn't know that of the 21,000 uninsured children, 14,000 are eligible, because I just want you to show you what would happen if. So the marker behind me shows you, the slide behind me shows you what would happen if everyone got what they should, right? So just go with me for a second. If everyone got what they should, 56,000 people will get free health insurance in Alameda County. This is just Alameda County data specific. 56,000 people will be newly eligible for Medicaid, a free health benefit. But often, and one of the great fallacies of the uninsured, is that the uninsured are the truly indigent, the truly poor. It's not true. If you see behind me, almost twice as many Alameda County residents are working poor and uninsured. That's the 107,000 who are between 133% of federal poverty and 400%. So another way to look at that is from 0 to 16,000 a year is to 133, and 16,000 to about 45,000 a year is 400% of federal poverty. Those 107,000 Alameda County residents will have their purchasing power pooled, and they will purchase health insurance through something called Covered California, otherwise known as the exchange. And think of it like an eBay for health insurance. It's an internet site where you get qualified to sell your wares based on a set of rules: an essential benefit package, a cost, a network adequacy. Can you see a doctor in time within close proximity of your zip code? And so that's what the exchange is. And you'll pay based on your income. So the price will be different at 138 than it will be at 399% of federal poverty. And the prices on the exchange are interesting. It's worth checking it out. Covered California. Google it. Up will come. You can say where you live. You can say how much you want to pay, and you get to choose between a higher monthly premium or a lower monthly premium and a higher copay. And there's 4 plans, I think, that are currently qualified to sell their wares in Alameda County. And again, the Affordable Care Act is focused on the working poor. The vast majority of the uninsured are not the indigent, not the Medicaid population, but are those people with 1, 2, even 3 jobs whose employer doesn't offer health insurance, and it's too expensive for them to buy it on the private market. But as I mentioned, Alameda County has been very aggressive in early adopter provision. In 2010, when the bill passed, the bill said you can expand on Medicaid eligibility right now, but the state was broke in 2010, remember? So a few of us who were working at the county level said, the state may be broke, but the county's not. The county, in a very progressive act, passed Measure A in 2004, a half-cent sales tax for healthcare. That's the reason your public hospital is the only public hospital in the state of California with a positive operating margin. It's because it has a $75 million subsidy through Measure A. It's why you have some of the most advanced EMS medical equipment and systems in the nation. And it's also why you enjoy we enjoy some of the broadest community clinic network in the nation as well, is because we subsidize our safety net through Measure A. Well, we were able to take that money, pass it up to the state, get it certified as a state expenditure to pull down a federal match. That's how basically Medicaid works. And so basically through an entrepreneurial spirit and aggressive leveraging strategy, we're able to bring in over $50 million a year and enroll 90,000 people in Health Pack, or the pre-Medicaid expansion. 45,000 of them will automatically convert to Medicaid January 1st. 45,000 of the 56,000 will automatically convert. This number far exceeds any other jurisdiction. In fact, UCLA's Institute for Health Policy Studies produced an evaluation of the low-income health program, this pre-adopter program. Alameda County ranked number 1 with 94% of the pre-Medicaid population pre-enrolled. The next closest county was 66%. The state average is 15%. So it's hard to overstate this. What this means is that 45,000 people who currently get care in our system on January 1 will be automatically transitioned into Medicaid, assigned to the medical home they're currently getting care at, and that site will begin to be able to bill Medicaid beginning January 1, first day. So it's an important act to sustain the safety net, but also get people into healthcare coverage immediately. This chart just shows you where we have people unenrolled. The darker colors show you where you still have more than 1,200 people, despite our success in Health Pack, despite our relatively progressive safety net. There's still a lot of work to be done to create this culture of coverage. And as we say, the Achilles heel of health reform is eligibility does not mean enrollment. Enrollment doesn't mean access, because even if you're in Medicaid, we haven't attracted enough doctors to the Medicaid program. We don't pay well enough, right? It's a harsh truth. And if you don't pay well enough, you can't attract providers. Access doesn't mean better health outcomes, because frankly, better health outcomes are associated with a good job and clean air and a sense of meaning and belonging and a sense of community, good schools to send your kids to. That's actually what leads to good health outcomes. Unfortunately, healthcare actually doesn't necessarily always bring what we want. And finally, in order to attract providers, we have to get people into coverage. And this is, I think, the greatest challenge we face. Think about how coverage works as a business model. It's like an umbrella, and you collect, for every enrollee, you collect it per member per month. If you only have sick people under the umbrella, it doesn't work. You have to have healthy people enrolled so you can collect from them to pay for the people who are sick. So for the 26-year-old guy who lives in East Oakland, who doesn't believe he needs health care coverage because he's never been sick, we still have to get them to enroll, or the system won't succeed. Our system has 3-month wait times and 6 months for specialty care. So this, again, refers to this chronic shortage we have of primary and preventative care. American healthcare is the best if you're really, really sick. Every hospital you know has a private floor where people from around the world get flown into and pay straight cash. So when you get really sick, you want to be in America. But for primary and preventative care, we have some of the worst health outcomes in the world. And we just don't do enough of it. We don't invest in it. These are our 14 hospitals. This is our whole map. All of this is available on acehealthcare.org. And you can see a version of the presentation I'm giving right now, plus all of our data and epidemiological work. And to close, we've just completed a really important expansion that I'd like to leave you with some hopefulness about what we could do to re-engineer this system. In 1996, my predecessors started school-based health centers. And I think it was largely done as a philanthropic effort, an interesting experiment. By 2000, we had 8. By 2004, we had 12. By 2008, we had 14. By 2010, we had 19. By 2012, we had 26. And next week, we'll open our 28th. Each one of these are federally qualified, which basically means they're as nice as where you get your care. They have a lab and they have a pharmacy. And the reason I bring them up is we think they're an important lesson about a reformed healthcare system, about what we could do if we invested in primary and preventative care in the place where people are. I'm often asked, what will it take, Alex, for you to know when the healthcare system has reformed? The first thing is primary care would be open 3 p.m. to 10 p.m. Because if you believe me that a good job is more important than the best doctor, why do we open healthcare during the hours when people have to be at work? If you're open at 3:30, you'd pick up the trades. If you're open at 6:30, you'd pick up the post 9 to 5ers. It's also true that our ambulances and hospitals go on diversion most frequently, meaning the emergency rooms are full, between 3 and 10 p.m. as well. More than half of all emergency room visits could have been seen in primary care if primary care was open and available. The second thing I'd know is if our extremely highly trained fire paramedics could immunize people, because they can trach you, they can start an IV line, but because of a scope of practice battle that the paramedics lost to the nurses in the late 90s, they can't immunize you. We've developed healthcare systems for the people who work in them, not for the people who need access to care in them. So the two great symbols of change that I would see are a significant loosening of the scope of practice and a primary and preventative care system that's accessible and available. And this is what such a system would look like. This is your current system. GAC stands for General Acute Care Hospital. That's a hospital with a 911 receiving center. We've wrapped as much primary care as we can. Kaiser had it right. We're in the birthplace of Kaiser, by the way. It's a great, beautiful thing. Kaiser's done some incredible advancements in care. In all of our 14 911 receiving centers, if you show up before midnight and you have a lower acuity presenting problem, you're diverted to a lower cost setting. Take the cost per unit from $800 or $900 down to $300 or $400, it makes sense. Good move. But what the school-based clinic showed us, and what I'd end this talk with, is that there should be a new level of care in our healthcare system. We call them portals. There's 28 of them in schools. And you see it happening right now in Albany, because it's happening in CVS and Walgreens and Rite Aid and Safeway and Walmart even. What we call retail clinics or doc in a box. Primary care is so poor, even for those of us who are commercially insured. It's so hard to get into primary care that the private sector has realized if they open themselves up from 7 p.m. to midnight and you want to get your prescription refilled, you can walk in, spend $45, see a nurse practitioner, and get your script filled. I know, because Safeway came to hire me, They lose money on every interaction. They make money filling your script and selling you candy on the way out the door. This type of care is deeply distressing for those of us who believe that healthcare should be fully integrated and delivered as a public utility. It's not connected to the emergency room, it's not connected to the ambulance, it's not connected to your primary care provider. So this type of care that's open and available and accessible, we believe should be provided in schools, in community colleges, we believe ultimately in fire stations, and we also believe in day labor centers as a way to decrease the cost for the undocumented who are filling our emergency rooms. Finally, just to complete the model here, our EMS system and prevention, which would be the heart of any good healthcare system. And the theory behind this bullseye is if you're a person on the outside, you would interact with each layer of the system, keeping you out of the high-cost setting at the center. This is a screenshot of our website where you can find a doctor. You type in your name, what you want, and it will give you, through GPS, the closest accessible appointment, plus list of all resources and links to state and federal health reform resources. And these are the citations from the presentation. I'm happy to take any questions if there's time.
I actually used to sort of do this stuff about 20 years ago, so my jargon might be a little dated, but on the ratables for doctors, you know, I haven't heard much discussion of having Medicaid, you know, get their payments back up so you can attract more doctors in this whole discussion.
So it's a great question, and in fact, the Affordable Care Act did take a very aggressive action on one piece of this, which is when Title 19 was created and Medicare and Medicaid were created, you immediately saw it was okay to age in our society, kinda, but not okay to be poor, because Medicare rates stayed slightly competitive. Again, I don't want to overstate it. And Medicaid rates dropped off a cliff. So the Affordable Care Act requires that in all ambulatory care settings, that Medicaid reimbursement match Medicare for the first 2 years of the act. So there was an artificial bump in reimbursements for Medicaid. Now, I don't want to claim that that's sufficient to attract providers. The other problem is the feds didn't know how to implement it, so it's just kicking in now, right? Almost 3 years after the law was passed. But directly to your point, Medicaid rates were required to come up to Medicare rates for the first 2 years of implementation as an attempt to attract more providers to Medicaid. The other important context here, very good question, is Medicaid in California, known as Medi-Cal, used to be a fee-for-service program. You had a card that said Medi-Cal on it, and you walked around trying to find someone to take $22 a visit. And it was like having a ticket to nowhere. But over the last 6 years, Medicaid has become a managed care product. So if you have Medi-Cal in Alameda County, you are more likely to have a card that says Alameda Alliance or Alameda Blue Cross than you are to have one that says just Medi-Cal. There's still some, about 20% just say Medi-Cal. So the change to managed care has also changed reimbursement because managed care isn't tied in to such a rigid rate structure. So the Alameda Alliance, which has over 150,000 enrollees, 60% of their primary care providers are private community physicians. So the managed care plans have been able to attract private providers. The fee-for-service program has not. So there's some hope to bringing in private providers, but the rates are still not where they need to be.
And next question, having been married to a nurse practitioner, and that is scope of practice, I think, you know, you've got to get rid of the stranglehold that the AMA has on providing service. So how's that going?
Yeah, I think if you looked at my back, you'll see the lashings from the California Nurses Association are still there. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I don't know what to say. And until the docs stop fighting the PAs and the NPs and the nurses stop fighting the paramedics, it's one of the most distressing parts of this work for me. I can't say anything other than I could not agree more. It's deeply, deeply disturbing. And frankly, this is only addressed at the state level. There's no other industrialized nation in the world that won't let a paramedic immunize you. In fact, when H1N1 hit, we had this challenge. We had 200,000 low-income people we had to vaccinate. So using the power of the health officer, we declared a local state of emergency. We used our fire paramedics and EMTs to vaccinate, and we vaccinated more low-income people per capita than any county in the state of California. People flock to fire stations because they trust them, they know them. Firefighters are the most popular public service in America, and 80% of what they do is EMS. So it's an extraordinary resource that's untouched and untapped. Alameda County was just selected as one of 10 regions to do a community paramedicine pilot, where we're going to, again, get a brief reprieve in the scope of practice, and paramedics, at least in 2 jurisdictions, are going to do discharge follow-up. So when someone's discharged from the hospital, they'll show up at their house to make sure that they got their meds. And for frequent flyers, for people who call 911 more than 4 times in a month, we'll do a home visit. So it's at least a slight crack in the armor. But again, I could not agree more.
For your last question, quick one. On the FMAP, the federal matching rate, California's is pretty close to 50-50.
So this is another really great question. For all the mistakes that the Obama administration made in this thing, and there are many, because as much as I applaud the courage, a really smart thing that he did was for the first 2 years of the act, the FMAP is actually 100%. So for those 56,000 people, for the first 2 years, from 2014 to 2016, the state doesn't have to put up a penny. And the reason that was so shrewd was he dared governors to turn it down. 24 of them did, on purely ideological and political grounds, starving their local economies of hundreds of millions of dollars of free federal money. In fact, they could have, those 24 governors could have said yes, and after 2 years backed out, with no cost to their states. And I remain fascinated by what argument a governor could possibly make for not accepting the Medicaid expansion for at least 2 years, because they got the rest of the bill. It's federal law. You got to enroll in health insurance. You got to set up an exchange or give the feds the right to set up an exchange. But for, again, political and ideological reasons, 24 states at least, and maybe 25, I don't know anymore, have turned it down. So to your question, FMAP, which refers to the federal matching rate for Medi-Cal, historically, as you're absolutely correct, it's either dollar for dollar or 50 cents on the dollar, depending. That's how Title 19 works. It basically is a pot of money that states can draw down in terms of how much match they put up to suck it down. Historically, it's been dollar for dollar or 50 cents on the dollar, depending on the program. What the Affordable Care Act does is say for the first 2 years, 100% for Medicaid. All of the money comes from the feds. And I am deeply surprised that any governor could look their people in the eye and say no for at least the first 2 years. It titrates down from 100% to between 2014 and 2018 to 90-10. So even in perpetuity, it's still a 90% match. With the exception of some transportation dollars, the single best investment of state general fund for federal match.
And my understanding is, poor states, the FMAP is higher for poor states. The feds match at a higher rate. But these tend to be the states which are not opting in.
That's true historically, but for all states, from 2014 to 2016, saying yes means you get the program for free. Crazy, crazy.
Anybody else?
I was wondering about the Alameda Alliance. Do I have a name right?
Yes.
So I have a friend in that. Is that eligible under the ACA? Did they get kicked out?
Yeah, so I'm a board member, so I'm not disinterested, so I need to say. Yes, so not to get too into it, but basically every health plan has to have a required reserve. It's called TNE, or Tangible Net Equity. And what it basically means is if everyone on your plan got sick tomorrow, do you have enough money in reserve to pay their bills? So it's like a required amount of money you have to have. So the Alliance is one of the most successful Medicaid managed care plans in the state. So we truly do have an extraordinary plan. We were qualified as one of only 2 health plans to sell our wares in the exchange, the 138 to 400 for the working poor. Only 2 plans in the entire state, public plans, were qualified to sell on the exchange. The Alliance was one of them. Once we joined the exchange, we dipped below the tangible net equity line and it had to be removed until January. So it's temporary, but it was on the front page of a bunch of papers.
I was upset.
Yeah. What I like to say is, if we had the public option, I believed in the public option when it was being considered. And frankly, the public option would have done what Medicare has already done, which is outcompete private plans in the 64 and older world, right? You can buy supplemental insurance in Medicare, but everyone has Medicare as their base. The Alameda Alliance is our local public option. It's a public plan. It invests nothing in profit, minimally in marketing, and by HEDIS scores, the quality scores that you judge the quality of a plan, how many doctors if it has, what's the patient satisfaction, what's the cost per discharge, all the ways you measure the quality of a plan. the Alameda Alliance outcompetes Blue Cross and all the private sector competitors significantly, as it should, because it has more money, because it has nothing for profit. It has a 12% running head start. So our plan is excellent. It will be back on the exchange as one of only 2 public plans, and I thought the press was unfair, but yeah.
Any other questions? Anybody in the audience have a question you'd like answered? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very interesting.
That was excellent. Thanks a lot.
Next item, please.
Good of the city public forum announcements for persons desiring to address the city council on an item that's not on the agenda. Please note that city policy limits each speaker up to 3 minutes. The Brown Act limits the council's ability to take and/or discuss items that are not on the agenda. Therefore, such items are normally referred to staff for comment or to a future agenda.
Is there anyone who would like to speak on an item not on the agenda?
Hi, Amber Whitson, representing the Bull residents. First off, I'd like to point out that homeless people are people too. It's not people and homeless people. It's people and people who are homeless that are people as well as the people who are not. The city has not been willing to engage in conversation with the people who live out on the Albany Bulb in the 20 years that people have lived there. Previous attempts at resolving concerns about the Albany waterfront have failed. Now, Albany's idea of solving homelessness ignores the Housing First model that the Homeless Task Force was instructed to use as a base, showing that the council had no intention of heeding anything that was determined or decided upon or even suggested by the Homeless Task Force. Instead, the agency who lost the trust of Albany's homeless in 1999, including some of those who still live out there now, has been chosen to fail again, and they have failed. On the day that the shelter opened, Alex McElry himself told me to his face that they had told me to my face in front of a reporter and another disabled Bulb resident that they have absolutely no intention of complying with the Fair Housing Act amendments regarding emotional support animals or service animals. So the seizure dog and the person whose seizure dog it is that live out on the Albany Bulb cannot stay in the shelter, because his dog would have to be outside in one of the pens in back. At least 3 different Bulb residents have been turned away when they showed up during the hours that they were supposed to check in at the shelter because they weren't on the list. Now I've got people asking me if I can get them on the list, and I don't even know who has the list. I don't even know what the list is. But they get turned away from the shelter on a regular basis. One person got turned away twice, and he's been working with Berkeley Food and Housing Project every single day. Like days of the week they're not even supposed to be out there, they come pick him and his wife up. And they're not on the list. He got turned away from the shelter 2 different nights in a row by Operation Dignity. Who's failing again, like I said? Workers have stated that they give the previous night's leftovers to the homeless. Yet they say they'll be fired if they give it away to the homeless on the property on the waterfront. So after this was known, Jesse, who works for the city, came out and let a couple of the Bulb residents know that they shouldn't let the food go to waste and that they can come and eat the dinner at the shelter and they don't have to stay the night. So then they showed up that night to eat dinner and they saw this feast laid out and it looked good and it smelled good, and the woman at the shelter said, no, you got to stay the night if you want to eat any of this food. And so they had to go away hungry. When's the last time one of you people has actually been like hungry? Because let me tell you, it's not an easy winter for gathering food this winter. It is not easy. A lot of us end up hungry. When's the last time you've been actually hungry? Like human beings get hungry. Can you imagine seeing food and not being able to actually taste any of it and having to walk the entire length of the neck before you can go back to somewhere where you can hopefully find food from your neighbor? This is what we get for our transitional housing homeless shelter. Humans.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on a topic not on the agenda? Seeing no one, next item, please.
New business, City Council Health Benefits, staff recommendation that the council receive the report and provide staff with any further direction on modification of current policies or additional information needed.
Mayor and members of the City Council, this item was placed on the agenda at the request of Councilmember Barnes. Staff has provided some background information on the costs associated with current city council health insurance benefits. And Aaron Walker, the HR manager, is also here. If you have questions, he or I can answer. Hopefully the background information gives you enough framework to have a discussion, and then if there are further items you'd like us either to investigate or report back or provide additional information on, we'd be glad to.
Thank you. Does anybody on the council have a question for staff? Okay. Would you like to start off the discussion, and then we'll go to the public, since this is your item?
Sure. This issue was contentious several years ago, and it came up during the campaign at the, I believe it was at the St. Albans Candidates Forum, and three of us, I think myself, Peter Moss, and Peggy Thompson, agreed that if we were elected, then we would discuss this issue. When I was on the school board members were allowed to participate in the school board's health plan, the same plan the teachers had, but at the same rate that the teachers did. My understanding is in the past, city council members were allowed to participate in the city's plan at the same rate as any employee. And presumably that includes in lieu payments, that if you do not take the plan, you can get an in lieu payment. And I think some council members in the past have done that as well. So there's two issues for me. One is an issue of fairness. My personal feeling is that, although I'm open to discussion, is that council members should have the same level of benefits as city employees, including the in lieu option, although I don't take it so far. And then the other question is, how big a cost issue is it? So those are the concerns that I have, and welcome to take it from there.
Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak to this issue?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Brian Parsley, Albany resident. I'm sure you're shocked to see me here on this subject. I don't know what I could say that I haven't said for the last 3 years, so I'm going to try to make it quick and simple. I think you should have parity with your staff. I understand the last time it came up, there were some who said you don't feel that you're employees of the city, but you take a benefit that is only afforded to employees of the city, whether that be the health care or the in lieu. It's very simple. It comes down to whether you're going to come in line with parity with the rest of the city employees, and that could be taking the Kaiser family and then paying the additional if you would like Blue Cross. That's what every other employee does. That's what every other member of the city staff does. I don't want to waste any more time with it. It's literally that simple. You either choose to do this or we continue this for another 2 or 3 years. If you choose to tonight, you're already going to wait till next October till open enrollment, because we're beyond the open enrollment date. So I don't know what else there is to say other than, do you want the trust of your city staff and your employees to think that their council is working for them as well as they're working for you? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Peggy McQuaid, Albany resident. I can't really say any more than Brian said, or probably any better, but I just wanted to say also, this has been going on for several years. As a body, the council set the health policy for the employees at the rate they did, and yet the council still has a better plan. There's something wrong with that. There's something wrong with governing in that way. And I think this is your real opportunity to show leadership and to say, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to take the same thing that the staff gets. If we want to pay the difference, that's fine. And we're going to be equal and have parity with our employees. And you're asking a lot of them. And I think to set yourselves up at a little different rate sends a really bad message to them. And this is not a time to do that. So I really hope that you look at this and make the right choice. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to speak to this?
Amber Witt's an Albany resident, and I just think that this is a good opportunity to point out the human beings point again. You guys are human, you're mortal, you're people, so are your staff. I don't understand why you guys should have some sort of something that puts you on some level above the city staff or any other Albany resident. You're public servants. You're public servants. That makes it sound like you're below everybody else, but really, you are one of all the rest of us. It could be any of us sitting in your seat. How would you feel if you were the staff and you knew that you were paying out of pocket for something that the city council members, these other Albany residents, be it me, be it whomever might be the city council members, was not having to pay out of pocket for that? Not as much. I mean, really, humans. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this? Seeing no one, we'll bring it back to council. You want to go first?
Otherwise.
I have a few more questions, and maybe Paul or Aaron can answer them. First of all, we do get paid $300 a month, and my understanding is that that $300 cash stipend was determined as part of the charter review process in about 2010. Is this ringing a bell to anyone? One issue I've had, it makes sense to me, and I don't know how difficult this would be, would just be to index that to inflation. Because right now, we have a funny situation, and again, nod yes or no, or speak out. The in-lieu payment is set at the individual Kaiser plan level, correct? That's $742.72, according to the staff report. So, but that is put into, we wouldn't get that as cash. The in lieu you get as part of a 457 plan, basically a 401k.
Tax-deferred account.
So it's like a 401 for the public
that you can access upon no longer being employed by the city.
Oh, you don't have to wait. Well, you can hang on to it until you retire.
Right.
Yeah. So basically, if I add 300 and 742, that's 1042 times 12. My effective salary, if I took the in lieu payment, would be $13,000 a year. I think that's pretty good money for what is a pretty part-time job. The odd thing is the bulk of the money is hidden in this funny kind of in lieu payment, da-da-da-da. So one option that the council could consider is, paying ourselves more in cash and not paying ourselves in the health care benefit. I mean, there's lots of options. I think $13,000 a year is actually, a pretty hefty salary for what we do. I mean, I think what we do is important, but I'm fine with that level of salary. It would be hard for me to ethically justify paying ourselves more than that. That's my concern. But as to how all that happens or how we want to try to rationalize this process, I'm open to suggestion.
Marge, you want to say something?
Yeah. So the $300, $277 after taxes is voted in by the constituents, so you can't really increase that without going back to the voters. This was an issue that came up. I heard a couple of people say it's contentious, but I'm not sure whether that's a word that would be considered contentious by everybody. Came up as a campaign issue a couple of years ago. My feeling is that I hear the word parity, and I'm not sure how they want to use parity in terms of whether that means equal or not. I have the feeling that it's more of an apples and oranges situation, and the people who work in Albany, the employees, is part of their negotiations, what they do for the health care. And at one point, a few years ago, actually before I was elected, they made some trade-offs of capping the medical for other benefits that they received in their pension. So I don't think that, we're not in a unit that does negotiations, and I really feel like before a couple years ago, this wasn't an issue really at all, and the people that came before this council for many, many, many years got their benefits, and it wasn't an issue until an election a couple years ago. So there's that. For me, that's part of when it came up, and whether it's really a big deal now, I'm not really sure whether these speakers are speakers for the city or for the workers or not. But if we were consultants, in terms of the time we put in, I don't know exactly what you would pay us, but if you're talking about $50 an hour or more, this would be from a couple of years ago, I would say that the council puts in many hours that would make up more than the $13,000 or about $1,000 a month. Some of the other benefits that you would get if you are you have a unit that bargains for you, in terms of your pension, you get paid for hours worked. There's no way that we actually get paid for hours worked. We don't have pension benefits, sick pay, workers' comp, disability, many things that are found in the workers' packages. So it really feels to me that you do have apples and oranges. It's not the same thing. And I would hate to think that for the amount of money, which there was one figure that said, oh, you might save $20,000 for the in lieu payment a year, which is a nice sum. But the figures we have here, where if everybody took the top costs, it would maybe be about $15,000 per year. If I have that right, it doesn't seem like the figures are like more of a wash, or that it doesn't seem like tons and tons of money to make a huge, basically, fight out of this. So the other concern I have is with the ACA, the Affordable Care Act. I don't know whether that would be affecting the workers in the city or not. I'd really like to know more about whether that's an issue that would affect them or even affect us in some ways that might make a difference in terms of what costs are going to be. So I don't feel like I have enough information with that aspect to really make a change at this point. So I actually don't think the system is broken at this point. I would hate to have people after me or whoever that wants to be elected to not have the same benefits that the people have had, well, since they started doing this, which many, many years. So again, I don't think the system is broken, and I would not change things at this point.
Yeah, some of the points I want to make, just personally, this really doesn't affect me except for the last 2 months of my term. I do feel that, as I said in 2010, that we should be comparing packages with other city councils, not with staff and city council members. For example, if we just look at our salaries, 64% of the cities in the Bay Area are above the salaries that we get, 21% are below, and about 15% are at the same salary we get. And so purely on that comparison, we're not doing all that well. And then, as Marge mentioned, employees really get a series of benefits that are not available to city council members. That's more of a side point. And what I asked for in 2010, and if we want to really make a serious study of this, is that I think we should take a look at the salary list, which we have now, where 64% of the cities are above what we make. And then we should also look at benefit packages that other city councils have. For example, when are pensions included, vacation days, sick leave, and what are the health care benefits that those cities have. So again, if we're going to make a serious comparison, I think that's where the study should go.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I guess well, a couple of reactions to this being on the on the agenda tonight. You know, I know this has comes up periodically by some members of the community that, and it was in response to a social economic justice committee decision or thought. One, it would have been interesting to see notes or some kind of review of what their thinking was on that, because it often seems there's this one about injustice of not having, or supposed injustice of not being on a par with city employees, and then there's this economic savings, and those are kind of different issues. The economic savings issue seems to me fairly minor, given how little this costs compared to our greater city budget. The economic justice aspect of it, whether we should have a different deal than what the city employees have, I don't know. I have no idea whether the city employees resent us for having this slightly different program. I mean, I've never gotten that feedback. I've never heard it from anyone. But it would be, I don't know how you poll for something like that, but it would be interesting to see if that is the feeling amongst city employees. It does seem to me that understanding what other cities of our size and basic economic status are doing as not only in income but also in healthcare benefits would be useful in making this kind of decision. So, you know, at this point, without more information, I'd be hesitant to change the policy. You know, I can personally live with, you know, compensating the city with the difference between what we're getting on a Blue Cross plan, which, you know, when my wife initially looked at all this, the idea of, she realized that the plan that we got through Blue Shield in the city was so much better than what she was able to get from her work and what we'd been living with. And that although Kaiser might have been fine, you know, for us anyway, we had a whole bunch of doctors in place. I have a daughter that's got type 1 diabetes, and we wanted to keep those doctors going, and we could only do that through the Blue Shield. So, you know, I think it's sort of a personal choice for council people if they want to compensate the city, the difference between the Kaiser and the Blue Shield plans, and I think that's fine. So at this point, without more information, I'd like to see more information to make any kind of decision about changing the current practice.
Well, I'm quite willing to hold this over so we could get the information. Historically, I was on the school board, so some of that time I did, whenever I haven't needed the insurance, the medical insurance, I haven't taken it. But when I have needed it, it's been very useful, but I've always tried to take it at the same level as employees. So, you know, as Joanne said, we're not going to implement this until next October anyway. So I'd be quite willing to ask staff to provide us with the comparisons that she's asked for. We certainly could have that for the January meeting if that's what the council wants to do. I'd be glad to go along with that. I think I saw him first.
Okay, we did get a list of salaries for other local jurisdictions. I think Aaron produced that, but it's not clear whether those were fully loaded or not. There's a lot of city councils that get $300 a month in cash like we do. But some of these cities were, Hayward I think was one, they were listed in these documents as getting $12,000 a year. So I suspect that figure includes benefits. So if we're going to do a comparison like this, we really need to see what, you know, to split out those costs, you know, between cash and benefits. Second point, I would just like to say, when I was on the school board for 4 years, they paid us about $200 a month. There was no option of an in lieu payment. I didn't take the insurance because I had it from my employer. And if the school board had voted itself higher medical benefits than the teachers got, we would have heard from the teachers, including Marge Atkinson. So I find there's a little bit of hypocrisy here. I'm sorry.
There's lots of ifs. In about 2010, or when we discussed this before, I have a sheet from that time which shows almost every city around the Bay here, and then some, what they got in pay, what they get in health, and a lot of times, if they had Family Kaiser, they might have, or up to a certain amount, a lot of the councils also got more stipend. So our stipend is on the very, very low end side, and some of the stipends generally range, $5,000, $7,000, even $1,000 more. So it just depends on the city, and I'm sure there's a change now in a couple, 3 years. It also, at that time, they said whether it's the same as employees or different than employees, and so that kind of a sheet updated might be helpful. And also if the councils get any kind of pensions or that kind of thing. So looking at this, there's a lot of places that are much, that get more for a stipend than we do. But again, it would be interesting to see some of the new figures.
If I can just clarify a couple things on what's being requested, is there a target group so that we don't come back and find out? I mean, certainly Alameda County cities, we can do that. The surrounding Contra Costa cities, is that a large enough sample, or?
Is that a large enough sample, Alameda, Contra Costa? Is that?
Yeah, I guess. I mean,
I can give you this, but what you had before, a lot of these are too far away, probably wouldn't be good for us, but yeah, I would say, Alameda County, maybe even San Mateo, but.
Well, I think there's two issues. There is, in any kind of labor negotiation, you look at comparables, and the question is for fire or police or unions, what's a comparable city?
It's probably not just that they have 5 council members.
Yeah, so I think size
more
matters.
Complexities too.
I think smaller cities may not have the ability to pay, there's economies of scale with bigger cities, and so they can pay everybody more. That's always been a problem with our school district as well, at least for, core functions, administrative functions. So we need a set of comparable cities, I think, within some reasonable geographic area. So we could go up to El Cerrito, which is Contra Costa.
Right.
And then some sampling of similarly sized cities in Alameda County as well.
Okay. And we will also bring back, because I know a lot of, just from my personal experience working for other agencies, some of those cities fall under the state code, and the compensation for council members is based on a schedule. It starts at a scheduled rate based on their population. And then that code has a provision for consideration of escalators. The city's charter, it's my understanding, adopted the section dealing with the initial tier.
Well,
and so that's why when Aaron pulled off some of the information, you're seeing that an agency such as the one I last worked for, Dublin, that yes, in 1982 when they incorporated was at 300, but over the years they've also applied an escalator that's allowed under state law because they aren't a charter city. So.
Yeah, I think the reality we're facing is a charter city. This might have to go to charter review, and conceivably there would have to be some amendments made to the city charter.
That would be for stipend perhaps, but I don't know about medical.
Right, that's what I was just clarifying the stipend, because that's the only comparative information.
So are you saying that perhaps we should be mostly going for charter cities? No,
I was just trying to explain, because several of you had pointed out that there was quite a wide range of agencies that weren't necessarily at the $300 a month. And how did they get there? And I think the question was, have we included benefits? We included only what they reported as salaries. So assuming that the city's reported it correctly, it should be salaries. And the way that they've gotten above the $300 is they've probably implemented the provisions under state law that allowed them to make adjustments to that initial base amount.
So, can I clarify? So we can't change the stipend because it's in the charter, but I don't know if that's what we're interested in. We're interested in seeing the medical benefits.
Right. We will present though both.
But the other thing is
clear.
that there must be other creative ways. If people wanted to say, do we have like a tier thing, like you have, one person rate, and then you have the plus one, like two persons, and then you have a family thing. So if there's some creative way of saying, well, these are the options, but at some point, I don't think that there's any way that I would be interested in seeing anything that would make somebody on the council have to pay more than what their stipend was worth. In other words, to come up with, cash for something if you went in some direction. That I think anybody who gets elected and puts the time in and is, the public servant who is willing to do this should have some protection of some of the things that other people have had here. So I don't know if that's clear enough, but.
Yes, no, I understand the question. Part of that is we can't predict where rates will go in the future.
Right.
We know for 2014 that would not be the case.
Right. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay. Next item, please.
So are we clear what we're doing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nomination and election of mayor and vice mayor. Staff recommendation that the council nominate and elect members of the city council to the positions of mayor and vice mayor for a one-year term.
Okay, the chair will open the nominations for mayor.
I'd like to nominate Joanne Weil for mayor.
Okay.
Thank you very much, but I'd like to nominate Peggy Thompson.
I'll second that.
Peter for vice mayor.
Okay, let's stay with mayor first.
Okay, mayor first.
Yeah. All right.
You're doing a good job, and we appreciate everything you're doing.
So we have two nominations.
No, I'm withdrawing my name.
Oh, you are? Okay. Well, thank you. Okay, so then, all those in favor of Peggy Thompson?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Now nominations are open for vice chair. And
I'd like to nominate Peter Moss for vice mayor.
And I would like to nominate Joanne Weil, and the reason is we've worked very, very well together. I think we complement each other, and I think you would do a good job, but I really think that we've started some projects that I would hope that Joanne could help finish with. Okay, so we have two nominations.
Well, I'll second Joanne of your comment.
That's.
We
Okay,
we can revisit this in a year.
I would withdraw.
Okay,
What
so
about
all those in
succession
favor
planning?
of Joanne Weil for vice mayor? Aye.
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 And the nomination is carried. Next item, please. Thank you all.
Other business reports on meetings attended, announcements of events, future agenda items. The City Hall will be closed the week of December 23rd through the 27th and reopen on December 30th, 2013.
So I hope everybody will come to the senior center this Saturday. I think it starts at 9 or so and goes on, and they will have things for sale, and it'll be a great little Christmas boutique.
And I have, fortunately, sad news to end the meeting. We have one young man, John Kuhn, third generation Albany citizen, who was recently killed in a car crash. And we lost one of our former mayors, Bill Lewis, who was so involved with not only the city, but with everything youth. We have the Bill Lewis Teen Center just because of his involvement, and he got a whole bunch of volunteers together. They put together the center, and he worked for years with the Little League, and he just did so much, I think, to try to bring the community together when we actually had some difficult political times. So we are going to adjourn in their memory.